And we're live once again here at the Bend Elks Lodge, and we're here talking to Jack Cooper, who is veteran of the United States Navy, served during World War II. And glad to have you with us today, Jack. I think they can still see you. You're a little bit, you want to pull up your hat just a little bit so they can see your bright, shining face? How you doing, Jack?
I'm doing great.
Hold on a little bit closer.
I'm doing great.
Hey, you said you had a story to tell me.
It's sort of a funny story.
I like funny stories.
As opposed to the gruesome guts and blood kind of stories.
Yeah.
After going to boot camp and a few training schools, we finally got transferred to a Fleet Air Wing. And this was in 1943, and we took over anti-submarine patrol on the East Coast. We replaced the Army, and being Navy guys, we had to use Army airplanes because we didn't have our own airplanes at that time. So we were flying what was called the B-24s, and they were painted from a Navy viewpoint this ugly brown color.
Army color.
Army color.
Color of dirt, right?
We didn't get our airplanes for a while, but
okay.
One of the interesting things was that after we went through our training, our actual combat in chasing submarines around the East Coast,
right?
We were our tour of, you might call it, combat was over, and the admiral, an admiral named P.N.L. Bellinger, who happened to be Navy pilot number 8 from World War I, prior to World War I.
Okay, he has some history.
And he came to us and said that he would like us to set up a school to train future combat air crewmen on all the workings of this airplane, which was the B-24, or the Navy version was the PB-4Y2.
Okay.
So we said, oh, that would be great. And his next comment was, if you guys do a great job, he says, you're going to get a commendation. If you get caught, I don't know you. So
Does that sound like the military?
That sounded exactly
okay.
Like. So the first thing we did is we stole a requisition book. And then we stole a 10-ton stake truck.
Okay.
And we were on the East Coast near Norfolk Naval Air Station, and we drove the truck to the Norfolk Naval Air Station, showed the guards our pass, drove into the warehouse area, and started stealing things or borrowing them. We got a 750 horsepower Pratt & Whitney engine. We got a complete bombing system. We got a complete radio system. And we put all that stuff on the truck, and we took it back to our base, which was about 50, 75 miles from Norfolk, and we started to build this school. We used 4x8 pieces of wood and nailed all our stuff up on the wood so that everything was a working model. We took the engine, the Pratt & Whitney engine, and we cut a V out of it and then hooked it up to a battery, and we had little lights, and the battery would make the engine turn over, and when it was time for the spark plug to light, the little light would go on. So the newcomers coming in could see what was happening. Well, one of the Admiral's favorite things was my ordnance system. And I had a complete bombing system on a rack. And we had these 100-pound water bombs. They were called 100-pound water bombs because when they were full, they weighed 100 pounds. But in our case, they were empty. And he would call me on the phone and say, Cooper, set up the bombing system. So my job was to hook all these 10 bombs up onto a bombing system on the rack, and he would come into the building, ask me if everything was set up, and I would say, yes, sir. And he would always have some politicians with him, and he'd say, watch this, you guys. And he'd flip the switch, and all those bombs would drop on the floor and roll around on the floor, and he'd laugh and laugh. And then he would say, thanks, Cooper, good demo. And he'd leave. And he did that 10 or 12 times. And anyway, as it turned out, we never got caught. And I did get a combination medal, and I thought it was quite a deal until after the war. In fact, only a couple of years ago did I find out that he was really Naval Aviator number 8. And I thought that was pretty exciting.
That's very exciting. He's been around. So let's talk a little bit about your service. It's the World War II. You served in.
It was always on the East Coast.
Okay.
From Maine to Florida. Part of the time, we had this new airplane, which was the B-24 with a single tail. And
was that the Liberator?
No, the Liberator was a two-tail.
Okay.
This was a privateer.
All right.
And our job, at that time we were stationed in Patuxent Naval Air Station, which was the Navy Wright Field. And our job was, one of our jobs was to fly this airplane, service 3 engines, and do nothing for the 4th engine and see how long it would take for an engine to blow up without any service. We got 750 hours on the plane before the engine blew up. And so they found out that was pretty remarkable. But we had other jobs. We had to fly. We had 3 crews, and we'd fly 10 hours a day for 3 days, and then we'd fly 10 hours a night for 3 nights, and then we'd get 3 days off. And we were only 60 miles from Washington, D.C., so that was our Liberty Town. We had a lot of fun in Washington, D.C.
I bet.
One of the times we flew to Bangor, Maine, and loaded up the whole back end of this airplane, which was quite large, with live lobsters. And this was for the Officers Lobster Fest.
Okay.
Brought it back to the base. On the way back, it was my job to be in that part of the airplane. And I'm looking at these lobsters and fooling around, and they're like, clink, clink, clink.
Yeah.
And finally, I hear over my speakers, my earphones, "Cooper, stay out of those blankety-blank lobsters." At which point I dropped the stick. Another time we flew to Guantanamo Bay and loaded up the back end of the plane with rum from Cuba, Cuban rum.
Yeah.
Because our job was just to fly around for 10 hours and put time on the airplane. Then one time, the plane was on the ground at Patuxent, and I was standing on the wing with my buddy who was putting fuel into the wing, and an air came flying by, a little white airplane. And I said to my buddy, "Did you see that?" And he said, "Yeah, is this an airplane?" I said, no, that airplane didn't have a propeller." And he said, "You're full of...
Yeah.
Airplanes can't fly without a propeller." And I said, "Well, that one just did."
Yeah.
And so we got down off the airplane and we joined the other 10,000 guys down there in the field. And it was the first Navy jet, which we thought, how can that be? How can a plane fly without a propeller?
How does it do that?
So basically, I never really got into the guts of the war like some of the Marines I know.
Yeah.
When I joined up, the question that I had in my mind was, should I join the Marines or the Navy? And I had to weigh this decision. In the case of the Navy, I would get to sleep in white sheets, have 4 hot meals a day, and watch movies. If I joined the Marines, I'd be sleeping in the mud and eating K rations. So it wasn't really a difficult decision.